Hi everyone, welcome back to the MyRSILife.com YouTube channel. I'm your host Mitch, and yes, I'm wearing a suit today because we're going to be talking about jobs, especially for those of you with RSI or other kind of disruptive conditions. I'm going to share with you all of my best tips and strategies for being successful in the workplace. Before we dive into the job stuff, let's get a couple of prerequisites out of the way. First, you're going to need to actively pursue recovery. For most of us, that means getting regular exercise, eating healthy meals, talking to your doctor or your workers' comp doctor about recovering from your condition, dealing effectively with stress, all of those things. Once those are in place, you will find success at work to be much easier because your stress is lower. The second prerequisite that I'll mention is you need to have good workplace habits. No matter what during your workplace experience, you're going to need to take regular breaks away from the desk. You're going to need to have some sort of daily self-massage for your physical condition. In almost all these cases, you're going to need it to use a computer hands-free. There's a lot of different ways you can do that. There's other content on this channel about that. But anyway, those are the prerequisites. Okay, so now that we've got those prerequisites out of the way, let's talk about how to be successful at your current workplace. Staying with your employer has a lot of advantages. This is especially relevant to people who maybe have been recently injured, or those of you who enjoy working for your employer and are just uncomfortable with the idea of making a switch right now and want to make it work where you're at, which is totally possible. In fact, following my injury, I stayed with my employer for nearly a year, so it really is a great option. So I have 3 tips for you here today. Tip number 1, if you were injured at work, report your injury and start receiving workers' compensation benefits if you haven't done so already. And in almost all cases, especially here in the United States, employers are required to carry workers' comp insurance. So don't leave potential free medical care or other benefits on the table if they're owed to you, and your company is paying workers' comp insurance specifically to give you care when you're injured. And if you're not getting that care when you're injured, it's the company's money also wasted. And talk to your boss or your HR representative as soon as possible if you have not reported your workplace injury. Okay, tip number 2 is be honest with your boss or your employer or your school about your accommodation needs. So you really won't receive what you don't ask for in this world, for better or worse. And oftentimes employers, colleges, and perhaps even your middle school or high schools can provide funds for accessibility tools and gadgets like that Dragon Dictation software or microphones or alternative ergonomic equipment, foot pedals, things like that. So just ask for them and see what they have. Along those same lines, some accommodations are extremely easy to provide. They're basically free to provide. Especially these days, it's becoming more and more common to work from home. I enjoy working from home with RSI because I don't like dictating my sensitive emails and information in a room full of people. That may be an option to you as well. At the very least, they should be able to provide you a silent room or a private room to dictate your sensitive information or messages. You can also ask for one-on-one help from an IT coworker to help you set up your computer with your accessibility settings and gadgets. You can always just ask your boss for help, ask your coworker for help, and those kinds of accommodations are within your grasp. Then third tip is to just be a good teammate, a good coworker, a good boss, whatever your role is. This point is applicable, of course, to keeping your job, but also throughout the rest of the video too. So being trusted, being reliable, being easy to work with, and being honest with people will endear others towards you. It will earn you respect. It will make people more willing to help you when you need help. It will just create a better workplace environment both for yourself and the people you work with. One thing that having RSI kind of taught me is that when you can't use your hands to get your work done, your people skills become so much more important. Now for this next section of the video, let's talk about how to pivot your career into something which is close to what you do now, but different enough to give your RSI a break and help you meet those other goals in your life. This is something that I've done in my life and my career as well. I stayed at my job for about a year and then I quit to do something similar but new enough that and just a little bit more control. This section does have prerequisites as well. For prerequisite number 1, I recommend in a journal or in a brainstorm session, however you do your thinking and your goal setting, brainstorm 5 things. Your specific needs, your specific capabilities, your preferences, strengths, and accommodations. So, just a few sentences for each of those topics, write down what those are for you in your life. You can of course get help from your doctor or your occupational therapist on those accommodation pieces if you need to. So that's a really good brainstorm activity. Another one is to make a list of skills that you still have. So you have perhaps good people skills or negotiating skills, or you have experience in your career, you have experience in a specific industry, or you have specific knowledge about your employer that is valuable. So write all of those skills and knowledge down. Even things that you may consider not related to your career, like talents or hobbies, like cooking or sports or art or anything like that. Write down in your journal. Last thing here to journal in this prerequisite is that given your condition and your recovery goals, describe to yourself your ideal job. What work conditions and duties and hours and accommodations would support your physical needs, as well as your personality and your lifestyle and your long-term goals. Okay, prerequisite number 2 is before you pivot, consider taking an extended career hiatus. And we've talked about this in other videos too. Just take a lot of time off work, months if possible, if you can budget it and plan for it. This is another thing that I did in my career. Take that hiatus and consider your options, rest your body, ease your mind for a long time, because if you have RSI, probably you've been pushing it for a long time. And you can take this time too to just explore new hobbies and passions. So that's all the prerequisites. Now let's get into it. Okay, I have 2 tips for pivoting your career within your field or industry. So tip number 1 is to leverage your network. Your professional network can be extremely valuable. Old coworkers, old bosses, former employees, all of those people can provide you letters of recommendation, direct referrals to opportunities. If you are young and you don't have that strong of a professional network just yet, you can hopefully still rely on your friends and family. You can rely on hopefully your teachers and school counselors to introduce you to their professional contacts, give you advice about your specific situation. And some of those friends and family may even be able to hire you directly. And then before you reach out to your contacts, before you start communicating with this network about your career goals and things, make sure to completely know your workplace preferences and your ideal job or jobs, just like we just brainstormed in the prerequisites. I found in my professional life that my networking efforts lead to always the best results when I communicate my goals and my talents very specifically. And tip number 2 for my last tip for pivoting, I'm just gonna list out my ideas for the activities and jobs that most people can pivot to no matter what industry they're in. The first one I had is a mentor to new employees or a trainer, and you can present best practices training sessions for your organization or lead those new employee onboarding sessions or things like that. The next one is you could be a freelance or independent within your field. Sometimes you can even ask your employer, hey, I can do this job, I'm good at this job, why don't you just make me independent and I'll quit and you can pay me a rate. Then you can set your own hours and you can have a little bit more flexibility when you're freelance or independent. And then the next 3 that I will list come with kind of an asterisk. That is, as long as you can delegate most of the documentation or data entry or kind of PowerPoint and Excel. If you can find a way to do that hands-free or delegate it, these 3 things will be good for you. Salesperson. A lot of the daily activities for salespeople involve talking to people. Salespeople across industries, the job descriptions can vary and the duties vary quite significantly. You could also become a manager or a leader. Say, hey, I've been doing this job for a long time. I know how the team works. I can stop doing the day-to-day and go and be a leader. That may be an option to you. And then you could also be a project manager. You could pivot into a role that does more organizing and more talking to people than actually using the mouse and keyboard. Ultimately, I'll conclude tip number 2 with focus on finding a job which uses your knowledge of the employer, your knowledge of the industry or your field to find a role where you mostly talk to people or mostly do tasks away from the keyboard. Next up, let's talk about ways that we can completely start over, whether that's due to your computer-related RSI or not. And I'll tell you what, everyone that I've met with computer-related RSI, and me too, has considered this option at some point or another. When you're at your wit's end and you can't work in your job or field at all, you want to try something new for a while, here are some ideas to help you stay on your feet. Tip number one is to pursue passive sources of income. And when you have RSI, the idea of earning extra income with minimal direct involvement kind of becomes more appealing. So you could rent out a room of your home if you own your home. You could start investing in dividend stocks. There's a lot of other ideas out there. This isn't a finance channel. You can Google, passive income ideas for more ideas. And it's kind of planting seeds, right? Don't get me wrong. I'm not trying to imply that this is easy or quick at all. Passive income usually takes a long time to plan and a long time to be successful. Okay, tip number two, I'll just list off what I brainstormed for jobs you can jump into with relatively low barriers to entry, and that may be able to help you accelerate your recovery and keep you on your feet financially. You could be, I'm just going to list them off here: personal fitness trainer, animal trainer, security guard, tutor, gardener, tour guide, librarian, teacher or substitute teacher, dog walker, actor or comedian, custodian. This one as well comes with an asterisk because you may need to delegate or master your hands-free computer tools. Certain knowledge professions. You maybe pivot to, if you have work experience, you may need to go back to school or get some certifications for these, but knowledge professions, if you want to start over, can be lucrative, like being a consultant, an attorney, psychologist, financial analyst, insurance underwriter, a scientist, all sorts of science fields, etc. Another tip that I like to give people is just look at any company that you like and see what jobs they have on their available job postings. Sometimes you say, oh, I could be an analyst at whatever company that you love. So that's just something that I like to do or encourage people to do if they're looking to pivot their career or switch their career. And then last one, you could be an entrepreneur or a CEO or really start over. That's something that I don't really have a lot of experience in, but something that, of course, if you consider starting over, you may be thinking about. If you have the gumption, you may want to consider being that entrepreneur while you recover from RSI. Finally, to wrap up this video, I will give you my best interview tips. I've spent a lot of time in my career interviewing, and I spent the last half of 2021 and a few months in 2022 interviewing while talking about my RSI during those interviews. So I'll just talk about things that I found successful during that process. So I have several tips for you here. So tip number one is that during the job search, it's okay to be picky. What I mean by that is hold yourself to high standards. Don't settle for work conditions that you know will exacerbate your symptoms. And it's always okay to turn down employers. Tip number two is to practice talking about how you can get your work done and be successful at work without using your hands. For better or worse, it does come up in an interview, especially if you're talking about your accommodations. Employers need to know or want to know how you can do your job. I usually come to interviews prepared to answer those questions. So you can talk about how you use dictation, how you use alternative tools, or how you expect to do your job mostly by talking to people. Tip number three is to be honest with hiring managers, honest with the interviewers about your accommodation needs. Tell them unapologetically what your accommodations are. Tell them about your ideal workplace that you brainstormed a couple steps ago. Tell them about what work duties you can, that you're very capable of, and ask them if they can provide those accommodations. So tip number four is to think about for yourself whether the job is a good fit. So this kind of comes after the interview or even during the interview process, at least after your first interview. Be thinking about whether it's a good fit. And this is always difficult to answer because every individual has their own skills, experiences, financial situations. They're all totally different. But when I am considering whether the job is a good fit, here's what I think about. If I ever experience ableist attitudes, right? If I ever feel condescended, or if someone says something rude to me, especially about my condition, then that's a big red flag. That's usually a sign that it's not a good fit. The next part of estimating whether the job is a good fit for you is to check for understanding. Make sure that you're comfortable comfortable with the job description, and you can even look at specific points and say, hey, I need this accommodation to do this specific part of the job description. Make sure that the employer understands how they will provide for your needs. And you can even politely ask, do you need any clarification on what I need you to provide for this? Do you need any clarification on these sections of the job description? Or tell them, hey, I need clarification on this section of the job description. And then consider as well the job itself. Will this job help you accomplish your goals? Will this job have the right benefits and perks that you desire from your workplace? Do the people seem nice? Do they seem like people you would want to work with and get along with? Just remember that you are interviewing them too. An interview is an opportunity for you to get to know them and make your own decisions. So to conclude this video, I'll just wrap up by saying that I know that none of this is easy. It took me months and months and months to find the right job. Staying at my job after my injury was challenging. Quitting my job and just taking that leap was a challenge. Trying to be independent, being unemployed, and trying to find that balancing act was a challenge. Computer-related RSI makes your job harder. It makes the job search harder. To those of you struggling at work due to RSI or struggling to find work due to your RSI, I really sympathize with you and I know how you feel. I wish you the best of luck, and I hope that some of these tips can help you.